Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about the most underrated quarterbacks going into the 2020 fantasy football season. As you can see on screen, we're talking about second-year quarterbacks, the likes of Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones, Gardner Minshew, Drew Locke, and Dwayne Haskins. I think these guys are not only going to be greater leaders in 2020, have more experience under their belts, but be great contributors in terms of fantasy football. You know, over the past 5 seasons, we've seen incredible trends from second-year quarterbacks who have not only taken huge steps forward in their second year, but been fantasy dominators and guys that have to be in your lineups. I mean, just the past 2 seasons, Mahomes and Lamar Jackson were second-year quarterbacks that took over the league. And we're going to talk about who amongst the list that is behind me can be one of those guys going into the 2020 season, their potential, what I think, and who you should potentially be targeting, because again, they're all extremely undervalued except for the guy in the middle, of course. But either way, before we begin today's video, I want to go ahead and remind you guys, Andrew Kiorkof's 2020 Fantasy Football Draft Guide is now available. You can go down in the description of the video, find 2 links, one to my Patreon. Over there, you can find a video of me talking about what's going to be inside the draft guide and all the different content that I outside off of the channel, outside separate from the channel. And then my website's there, andrewkiorkof.com. If you guys are looking for more information on the draft guide, you can go ahead and ask me. Just go down to the comment section, let me know. Outside of that, subscribe to the channel for those of you who are new. We're bringing fantasy football content all season long. I mean, until December, I promise you that. Trying to do multiple uploads a day, it's definitely difficult, but either way, make sure you click the bell notification button to stay up to date. When my latest content is made available, you will be notified. All right, so let's talk about second-year quarterbacks, because like I mentioned, going into 2018, no one really anticipated Patrick Mahomes to have the dominating season that he had and finishes the #1 overall quarterback. No one really anticipated Lamar Jackson taking huge steps forward and becoming the beast that he was in 2019, breaking the rushing record for a single quarterback season. I mean, sure, I anticipated him surpassing 1,000 yards. You can go back last season and watch the Trust or Bust video on Lamar Jackson. I anticipated him surpassing 1,000 yards. But the way that he went about everything else, the 36 passing touchdowns, the turnover rate, which was pretty much nothing in comparison to some of these other quarterbacks. The improvements that we've seen from sophomore quarterbacks, second-year guys, is incredible. And it starts back from 2015. This trend has continued, and it's pretty consistent in terms that at least 2 quarterbacks every season in their second year are going to make huge steps forward. So let's talk about it. Going back to the 2014 draft, the 2 quarterbacks that were notable from that draft is Blake Bortles and Derek Carr. And in their rookie seasons, they weren't incredible. But I mean, Blake Bortles, as you can see on screen, described as BB 2014, had 11 passing touchdowns and 17 interceptions. Pretty much a great Blake Bortles, stat line there. But in his second season, he took huge steps forward, had 35 passing touchdowns, 18 interceptions. Again, he's always been an interception guy, but his rushing yards were there, rushing touchdowns were there, and fantasy points were incredible. I mean, the improvement that he made in his second year, something that we have to take into account, and we're going to continuously see from the quarterbacks that I mentioned as the episode continues. Going to Derek Carr in 2014. Sure, he didn't have a terrible rookie season, but the improvements that we saw from him in his next season, almost nearly a plus in 700 passing yards. On top of it, an increase of 11 passing touchdowns. The productivity overall jumps a huge distance in comparison to his rookie year. That's the experience that they gain, the comfort that they find within their offenses, the coordinators, the receivers. They finally find their rhythm in their second year, and that's why they make such an improvement. And that's what we're going to continue to see from these quarterbacks. Moving on to the 2016 quarterbacks, Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota, both guys that were drafted in 2015. Sure, Jameis Winston had a pretty good rookie season. A lot of it had to do with the fact that he had 6 rushing touchdowns. An extra 36 points there makes a huge difference. But in 2016, he was still better in terms of the passing game. The passing touchdowns increased by 6. Sure, there's interceptions there, but Jameis Winston has always been an interception fiend, as we can see the 30 for 30 that he had this past season. But overall, in my opinion, had a better 2016 season. Same thing happened with Marcus Mariota, who in his rookie season wasn't a bad quarterback, but made improvements and made an extra leap forward, 26 passing touchdowns in comparison to the 19 he had, an increase of nearly 600 passing yards, got himself more involved in the rushing game. Overall, had a great season in 2016, an incredible improvement overall. Moving on to 2017, Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. Now, Jared Goff wasn't given the opportunity to start right out the gate for the Los Angeles Rams at the time. And to be honest, it wasn't an accident, because even when he played, he wasn't great in his rookie season. But in 2017, made a huge improvement, finished with 28 passing touchdowns and 7 interceptions and led this team into the playoffs that season. Same thing happened with Carson Wentz. His rookie season, sure, he played and he was decent. His passing yards were, pretty good in comparison to years, after. But either way, he continued to produce and he continued to learn. In 2017, with only 13 games played prior to his injury, he ends up producing 33 passing touchdowns, which is a Philadelphia Eagles record, and dominating in terms of on-the-ground production and through the air production. And a guy that was unstoppable in his second year and finishes a top 5 fantasy quarterback despite not even finishing the whole season healthy. Incredible numbers overall. Moving on, we saw the same trend continue in 2018. Again, like I mentioned, Patrick Mahomes only played 1 game in his rookie season, yet ends up becoming the third quarterback in NFL history to throw for 50 passing touchdowns, one of very few quarterbacks to throw for over 5,000 yards, and has one of the most ridiculous seasons of all time. And on top of it, you had another quarterback in that draft class. Sure, Mitchell Trubisky did have a decent second season. So did a guy like Dak Prescott in 2016. Going into 2017, it didn't really matter because they had, we have these guys who made huge jumps of productivity. Desean Watson, that's who we're trying to talk about. I saw D and W and for some reason thought Dwayne Haskins. But Desean Watson in 2017, prior to getting injured, was a decent quarterback. But he came back in 2018, had better numbers and numbers that we thought, okay, in 2017, is he going to be able to be a sustainable product there? Is there going to be consistent fantasy production from a guy like Desean Watson? Despite everything that he did his rookie season, he came back from the injury and he dominated and was a top 5 fantasy quarterback. And especially in the past 2 seasons, has stayed consistent in that. Going to 2019, we saw Lamar Jackson take over the Baltimore Ravens and just dominate and put up one of the most ridiculous seasons. Again, 36 passing touchdowns, 1,200 rushing yards. And sure, the rushing yards, we're going to get there. And we knew that from looking at his rookie season stats. In only 7 starts in his rookie season, he was averaging nearly 80 rushing yards a game. So that was going to get there. But everything in comparison to the passing game, the turnover rate, the passing touchdowns, those were huge jumps that were all made and were incredible to see. On top of it, Josh Allen, a guy that sure wasn't the best quarterback in his rookie season, but definitely benefited from the fact that he's a rushing machine, got some productivity in terms of fantasy as an option late in the 2018 season, but in 2019 finished as a top 10 fantasy quarterback in 4-point per passing touchdown formats in a full season when he didn't have to miss with the elbow surgery that he had in 2018. He produced and he proved to everybody why he's a valuable fantasy quarterback. And now we move into 2020. We talk about the quarterbacks who could potentially make these kind of jumps in productivity and be the guys that are not only being undervalued, but be guys that you could draft super late and end up being the league winners. I mean, sure, Kyler Murray is a guy that right out the gate produced. So did, Dak Prescott. And I don't expect Dak Prescott to make a huge, Dak Prescott from year 1 to year 2 actually saw a decline. Baker Mayfield, the guy that produced pretty well in his rookie season, saw a decline in his sophomore season. I'm not saying that we're going to see a decline in Kyler Murray because he's not those players. They have different, opportunities, different variables and things that we can expect. But there's always an opportunity that Kyler Murray makes the next jump and he joins this group. But he definitely has the best opportunity out of the group comparatively. I mean, I didn't even post his stats on screen because, again, he's not an underrated quarterback. He's a quarterback that's being drafted as a top 5 guy, and he could potentially and should finish in that range because of what we've seen him do and the addition of a Kenyon Drake and a DeAndre Hopkins and an improved defense in Arizona. So let's forget about Kyler Murray right now. Let's assume he's going to already have a top 5 quarterback season in 2020. And let's look about, the other quarterbacks. Let's talk about Gardner Minshew in 2019. Had incredible numbers despite coming in due to the fact that Nick Foles was injured, getting benched, and then still coming back and fighting for the starting job and producing 21 touchdowns, 3,200 passing yards, only 6 interceptions thrown, having the mobility to produce 344 rushing yards, all on scrambles, might I add. I mean, this is not a designed quarterback offense that's getting him, quarterback counters and quarterback powers and read options. That's not the case here. He's scrambling for those yards and earning them every single down and producing, a pretty decent fantasy season. I mean, Gardner Minshew had just as many quarterback 1 performances last season than Tom Brady, just to kind of put that into account. He was not a bad quarterback and had, I think, 8 games of 2+ passing touchdowns last year in the time that he played. Gardner Minshew could make the next step, but the situation that he kind of sits in with the Jacksonville Jaguars, it's not the greatest organization in terms of being able to make an instant change and make an instant jump in productivity. Sure, they brought in a couple pieces. Their defense isn't as good as they used to be, and there's going to be times where Gardner Minshew is truly tested with this offensive line. So as a part of this group, do I think he's going to be the one that maybe makes that jump? I doubt it, but he definitely has an opportunity. Now, when we talk about another quarterback, let's talk about Dwayne Haskins really quickly. Dwayne Haskins, another one of these quarterbacks with the Washington football team, who I think at this moment in time, again, does not have the pieces that surround him to make him the most effective quarterback in comparison to what Kansas City had with Patrick Mahomes. The offense was already built around him. All you had to do was plug and play the quarterback, and he produced. Similar to Lamar Jackson, the offense was built to run the ball like that, and they changed it to help suit his needs and his strengths, and then they dominated. Even with that being said, I don't think the Washington football team have what it takes in terms of structure in offensive line play, running back play, or wide receiver play to help out Dwayne Haskins and allow him to make that next step in 2020. So we move on to the two other guys, Drew Locke and Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, who I've already talked about to an extent this offseason as one of the more underrated sleeper quarterbacks, a guy that you can draft extremely late in your respective drafts, have him as your second quarterback on roster, and a guy that, in my opinion, has the most talent surrounding him, along with Drew Locke, of this second-year group. I mean, Daniel Jones had a pretty decent rookie season in 13 total games started. 24 passing touchdowns, only 12 interceptions, had a great mobility of 279 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Decent in the passing game in terms of passing yards. That's always going to improve. And you have a healthy offense surrounding him. You have an improved offensive line. You went and drafted offensive line in the first and third round of your respective draft. You have yourselves a healthy Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Evan Ingram, Saquon Barkley, and a full season of Golden Tate. The sky's the limit for potentially Daniel Jones this upcoming season. I think he could be one of these guys that makes the next step. I mean, there's a reason why, in comparison to the other three quarterbacks that I mentioned, Dwayne Haskins, Drew Locke, and Gardner Minshew, there's a reason why Daniel Jones is being drafted ahead of them. It's because he has the most potential in comparison to the offense that's built around him already to make that next jump. And then we'll talk about the last quarterback. We'll talk about Drew Locke, a guy that, similarly to Daniel Jones, has an incredible offense surrounding him. I mean, besides the fact they were already kind of stacked last year in a couple aspects, they improve offensive line in terms of run blockers and pass blockers to give this man a little bit more time. You go ahead, you already have Cortland Sutton and a Noah Fant and Deshaun Hamilton, Tim Patrick. You go get Jerry Jeudy. Great, even better. And on top of it, you go and get his former tight end from college. You draft him in the third round. You have another 6'5" monster on the field running around. You go get Melvin Gordon in free agency. You still have Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. This is an offense that is absolutely stacked. Denver's kind of being slept on amongst the entire landscape. And I really do think that Drew Locke, a guy that's 4-1 as a starter in his career thus far, can really take steps forward. We saw glimpses of it last season against Houston. 3 passing touchdowns, over 300 passing yards, dominated in that game, and absolutely torched the Houston secondary. I mean, they put up 38 points, and those kind of glimpses are exciting me because I really do think the two of these quarterbacks have to make huge jumps in 2020. And I do think it's going to be between Drew Locke and Daniel Jones. These are the two guys that are the most capable, in my opinion, in terms of the productivity and readiness of their teams to help them get there. Sure, a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson can go and earn plays and make plays by themselves. But it's going to take a full team in order to help one of these quarterbacks make it to that next level. And I think they are, at this moment in time, in the best advantageous position to make those jumps in productivity. So those are the two guys that I'm looking for in these upcoming drafts to try to target. I want to get a late round Daniel Jones. I mean, as of right now, on my quarterback ranking, he's in that top 16 range. I think he's in the better half of the quarterback conversation, but he could definitely make a jump into the top 12 conversation and be a weekly starter because of what surrounds him and his ability. Drew Locke, in my opinion, again, is probably one. I mean, he's being extremely slept on. He's probably on the outside of the top 24 in many people's eyes. And again, you could easily draft him in the last round of your draft, or maybe even just pick him up off waivers in comparison. So again, those are the two guys that I'm most excited about. Of course, Kyler Murray's going to be a monster. Dwayne Haskins, Gardner Minshew don't have the best offenses that surround them or the best infrastructure in terms of teams. But overall, that's my thought process. Those are the most underrated quarterbacks, in my opinion, going into the 2020 fantasy football season. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Do you think this trend of quarterbacks is going to continue? And if it is, who are the quarterbacks that are going to be affected? Who is going to be the next Lamar Jackson or the next Patrick Mahomes or, the next Carson Wentz in their sophomore seasons, in their second years, who are going to dominate the fantasy landscape and really turn some heads this upcoming season? Again, subscribe to the channel for those of you who are new. Be a friend, tell a friend. We're trying to get to 13,000 subscribers here on the channel. I really do appreciate it. We're getting there slowly but surely, and I appreciate you guys spending your time here today. You could be watching anybody else, but you, again, decide to watch me. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.